Welcome to MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next. If you're not too careful, you just might learn something. Hi there. Welcome to another episode of MacGyver's Workshop, where you never know what we're going to be working on next, and if you're not too careful, you just might learn something. Today, we're going to be working on a 2012 Hyundai Sonata. Just a basic front brake job, but we'll check everything over and make sure everything's copacetic and go from there, shall we? Okay, we'll start by pulling the front wheels off, and this will be a 21 millimeter. I stand corrected. See what we got. Okay. Now, much to my friend's delight, this rotor is still in good shape. Let's get a look at the other side, shall we? Ruh-roh. There we went metal to metal on this one, and gouged up the rotor pretty good there. So it looks like we'll be doing front brake pads and at least one rotor on this one. Alright, so we'll start by turning our wheel out where we can get to this caliper, and then we'll compress this piston back. Get it, we'll go ahead and push it back so we can get our new brake pads in there. It's always best to do this before you start unbolting everything. She got every last mile out of these brake pads, that's for sure. Alright, so we'll start by taking the caliper itself loose, and that's a 14 millimeter bolt. It basically screws into a sliding pin. It's kind of a shoulder on it, so it's a unique bolt. You don't necessarily want to lose it. Now, this is a fairly straightforward job. Okay, the other one's the same way. It's got a little shoulder on it. And we'll just slide our caliper out of the way here. I'm going to try not to hang it by the hose. That's never a good thing. And there you go. She just started to get into it, but yeah, she was scared to death of it because this sounds terrible when it grinds like that. Alright, now we'll need to take our caliper bracket off, so then we can go after the two screws that hold this rotor on. Now to get these caliper brackets off, you need a 17 millimeter, and they're not going to come quietly. They're on there pretty good and tight. This top one is kind of tight in there to as far as getting a socket on there to run it off of the impact. It's really too tight to risk using a 3/8 drive because you might break it. But once you get it loose or broken loose, then you can put a socket and a ratchet on there. But the lower mounting bolt of the strut gets in the way. Alright, now, next thing we got to do here is we got to get these Phillips head screws out of here. I always like watching the other guys on YouTube. I was watching a video the other day, and the guy just takes a Phillips head screwdriver and pops these things loose. And but the reality of it is that they'll be frozen in there, and if you try to get on it with a Phillips head screwdriver, you're liable to waller the head out, and then you'll be, figuring out how to extract it. The best way to get these loose is to use an impact driver that has the correct bit on it. And when you get that in there, and then just shock it loose, and it doesn't ruin the head of the screw, and it breaks them loose for you. So, wonderful tool. Hondas are real very similar. They use a Phillips head screw to hold the rotor on. They're really bad about the head tearing up in them. Sometimes even when you're using an impact driver, they just say you get frozen in there so tight. And there we go. Now we'll go back together with this new stuff. Alright, let's get our new rotor open here. First you want to make sure that it matches your old one. We'll break the seal on it. Yep, we're good. See, this is actually fully sealed in there with a rust protectant so they don't rust. This is actually a painted rotor, which is kind of neat. And then go over it with some carbon choke cleaner, get any residual rust protectant off of there. They usually will have some sort of coating. Just wipe it nice and clean. And it's important to remember too that, especially the ones that have that real heavy rust protective coating on them, you're never going to get it all off with this carb spray. And when you start driving it down the road, make a few stops with it, it's going to smell funny for a little while till all that burns off. So, all right, let's get our rotor back on the car here. All right, now the only real trick is you want to make sure that you line the little holes for those two screws up when you put it on there. The rotor, you can put the rotor on in any orientation, but it'll only go one way to have your little screws lined up there. And you just pop those little puppies back in there. And I don't worry about snugging the crap out of them, because I'm sure the next guy who puts brakes on this thing, A, might be me, and two, if it's not me, I don't want to make his life any more miserable. So they really, all they do is need to be kind of snugged up. They're not going to come off, they ever come off, because you got the wheel on there. So okay, so assembly is just the reverse of what we did to take it apart. We'll put our caliper bracket back on here and check for damage, make sure nothing's broken or otherwise out of whack. Okay, now a good set of premium brake pads will come with some lubricant for like your sliders and the things like that, and it'll come with new hardware for caliper mounting bracket. So that's where you'll have these guys here, and I'll show you in a second how they go into the caliper bracket. So look at that. It even comes with instructions for, you know, us guys. Never follow instructions, right? So, alright, let me reorient the camera here and show you what we got. But before that, I'll show you the brake pads here. These come with the shims already on the back of them, and you know, without going overboard and too crazy, you know, it's always good to at least get your mid-level grade of brake pad. You get the real cheap ones, then you never know what they're made of. They might squeal or be real noisy, that sort of thing. You know, these are your Wherever Gold, which is one of the better brake pads that Advance Auto Parts sells. So, alright, let me change this camera around so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm going to pull these little brackets at it, or basically they're just steel shims that hold the brake pad in place to keep them from clicking when you stop. You know, they kind of take up the free play, and I always like doing them one at a time, and then take and make sure you match them up with the next one. If I can get lined up on the camera here, make sure you got the right thing, and go ahead and get them in here. And make sure they seat down in there. Sometimes they're going to be a little snug, and that's perfectly normal. They're designed to hold that brake pad in there nice and tight so that it doesn't, you know, screech or squeal on you. Put that in there like so. And you always want to check your slider pins and make sure that they are good and free, and they slide, move like they should. It's always a good idea too, when you're going back with your brake pads, to make sure that you line the wear indicators up in the correct orientation. Now I'm going to take the second brake pad out of the picture here. This one, you'll notice that the wear indicator is right here. You'll also notice that it's broken. That's what it's supposed to look like. Has this little tang that comes down, and kind of the same principle as your fingers going across the chalkboard. So she's been getting plenty of advance warning and then all of a sudden by the squeaking and squealing, and then it would have suddenly stopped when this finally broke off because it was pushing so hard against the rotor when the brake pad just worn out. So anyway, now we'll put our brake pads in. You really don't want to put any kind of goob or anything on the back of these pads. Some vehicles, you know, you end up having to, but nowadays, for the most part, you just really don't need to. They're, you know, everything's made a lot better than back in the day. You know, sometimes your Mercedes and BMWs and all that sort of thing, you know, wow, they'll give you a bunch of fits, and you know, you have to cheat and use some anti-squeak and all that kind of stuff. But if everything's in good nick, then it should work just fine with the factory shims that come on it. And they serve a couple of purposes. You know, they absorb resonant vibrations that would develop into a squeal or resonate into a squeal. And a lot of them are also, the thickness varies on here, so that instead of actually hitting the pad flat, I've seen somewhere it kind of, you know, hits a little more up at the top. That usually, you know, helps with one that's got a bad problem with squealing. So then we just put our caliper back on here, and if you have to force it, it isn't right. Just remember that. Everything should go together nice and easy peasy. So there's no need for a BFH or fire wrench or anything of that sort. So, and once you get that done, we'll snug these up and we'll put the wheel back on this side. Okay, we'll snug our caliper bolts back up here. One thing I should mention is to make sure that you don't try and take these two bolts loose. That's got nothing to do with the, you know, changing the brake pads. It's just holds, it's like a two-piece caliper and holds the two halves together. So, but you'll never need to worry about messing with that. Plus, it's got a funky head on it anyway, so chances are the average do-it-yourselfer is not going to have the correct socket to get it off anyway. So now, look at that, ain't she pretty? So I'm going to put our wheel back on here. Gently. Don't just sit there and zap them on. Especially with an aluminum wheel, because modern day wheels are what's called hub centric, and that's what actually centers the wheel onto the hub. It used to be, it would be lug centric, and that was a big problem with magnesium wheels, because then they would tend to come loose. You used to have to always check the torque on your lug nuts if you had mag wheels back in the day. But fortunately, that's not too much of an issue anymore. And once you get the first two, you ought to be good. Now, that's going to be pretty much it, because there's nothing really exciting on the other side. This is the one that had the damage. So that's how you change the brake pads or front brake pads anyway, on a 2012 Hyundai Sonata. So, thank you for watching, and stay tuned. Never know what we're going to be doing next time.